Hi and welcome everybody. My name is Tanya. I am actually a part of the Global Alliances team, and today we're going to be talking about data. And every time we at Apttus talk about data, we usually talk about XAuthor. And I actually volunteered, I asked to be put as a session owner to a session that's going to be talking about XAuthor because I don't think we're allowed to have favorites, but XAuthor is my favorite. And I think everybody who ever touched this product knows that it's an absolutely awesome tool. What very few people know is that we actually have an amazing group of people working with the product. And I can say that because I don't see any of our technology team here. I do have to maintain my reputation. I can't tell that to them. But they are absolutely amazing people. They are smart, they are funny, they're intelligent, and just fun to be around. What even less people know is that we actually also have awesome partners and customers. And in the last 2 days, we heard a lot about innovation, about technologies, and I think all of that is very, very important. But personally, for me, what's more important is that we have an amazing group of people, whether it's people that create our technology or implement technology or use our technology. And it's being a part of that that really makes it for me. So I have two awesome ladies here, Erin and Anna, and they're going to talk to you about data integration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, here we go. Welcome. Thank you to the last session of the day. We'll get you to happy hour really quickly. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about data integration. And I am Nana Gregg. I'm a VP and Senior Salesforce Administrator at JLL, which is Jones Lang LaSalle, global real estate company. I have been a Salesforce admin for just a little over a decade, so I've been around the space for a long time. I am also the co-host of a podcast called Nerd Force, where we talk about things that are a little bit nerdy, we talk about technology, we talk about a little bit of everything, so check us out. I am a declarative developer. I like points and click. I like anything that I can do without having to code. But when I do need some code, I know who to call my best developer friends. And why did they ask me to be a part of this session? I think I'm a firm believer in the fact that it's not who you know, it's not what you know, it's how you bring those two together, okay? And data integration, when we're talking about data integration, those two things are really important because it involves both the people and it involves the processes and it involves the data. And you got to figure out how to put those things together to have a successful data integration. And we're currently working through a data integration. My company actually was acquired by JLL about 9 months ago. I had a company that was really small, about 500 people. We had a great system going and we were acquired by this big company. And we now have to integrate with their systems. So I'm currently working through data integrations and working with the various teams to make sure that everybody's got the data they need from the front end to the back end of the company. So I'm going to hand that off to Erin.
Just want to click me in. There we go. All right, so I'm Erin Peterson. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success at Mintigo, which is a predictive marketing and analytics platform. But I actually have been a marketer my whole life. I've admined Marketo, I've admined Salesforce, I run a Salesforce user group. And why do I belong here? Because that doesn't really sound like a good data integration person. I've managed all the integrations in my own infrastructure, but I also, with Mintigo, we have the biggest B2B database in the world. We have about 50 million companies and 120 million contacts. And we also mine data about each of them so that we can build these predictive models. So we track 4,000 different data points about each of them. And our customers are calling on our system on a regular basis. Yesterday I got a notification, just an FYI, so I didn't panic, that one customer was going to run 2.1 million records against our system in one day. So making sure that the data systems are set up properly. We have customers on Salesforce, on SAP, on Dynamics, on Marketo, on Eloqua, all different platforms. And we're responsible for the integrations of their systems with our systems. And also, ultimately, we don't succeed if they don't succeed. So we're also very intimately involved in monitoring the way they have everything else integrated as well. And my quote, because I think this is highly relevant. So I have the little lights of my life are 7 and 11 years old, and they are normally very bold and aggressive and awesome. But we went on a family vacation to the beach, and they saw their very first large tropical bug and nearly lost their minds. And I heard all kinds of wailing from the bathroom because they'd found a bug. And I hear this booming adult man voice. The appropriate response of their father was, he said they saw this bug, and he said, you can squish it or you can free it, but you don't get to panic. And I think the same is highly relevant when you're working with data, which is there are going to be bugs. There's going to be stuff you don't anticipate, and you don't get to control that. What you can control is how you respond and how you work through these things and the way that you work with other people around them. So I think that is a nice carry through. Is he just said to her, he said, Emily, you are a self-rescuing princess. You can free it or you can squish it, but you don't get to panic. So, question for the audience. I think most of us, when we deal with data, we are either receiving requests from people saying, take my data, push it into these other systems, or we have somebody coming to us to say, can you take my, I need this data, I want data out of this system. And our responsibility as, data integrators and sysadmins is to figure out how to map all of that together. So, a quick poll, maybe. Here we go. Live poll. We'd love to know which of these are your audience, that you're either being requested, you're getting requests from these folks, or you're serving these folks as your customers. All of us are ultimately, if you're doing any kind of data work, your customers are largely internal. So we'd love to know if you are, who it is that you're working with mostly.
Yeah, so take out your phone. You'll have to text Apttus poll to 22333. And then once you've joined, then you can text your option, A, B, C, D, or E. So which of these users often ask you for data integration support? Anybody?
Whoever responds first wins.
Yep.
You're the only one.
It's a game.
Oh,
look at that. Awesome. I love this live polling. It's
I know,
pretty
this
cool.
is fun. I want this in all my sessions.
I know.
This is great.
More than one of the above.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, this is very interesting.
That's what I expected.
I currently work in customer success, and my last job was in marketing, and I was my own biggest customer. So I think this is quite cool to see. All right, cool. So I think the big things, for us is I've had all these roles. I've been in all these jobs, and I've also served them all as my customer. And I think it's, and I will also say my first time doing data integrations and managing CRM and marketing automation, I was voluntold, right? I got a job doing this process. They're like, hey, we're going to have you run demand gen and you're going to do some marketing ops. And they're like, here's the login to Marketo. And I was like, what's a Marketo, right? No idea. So I think many of us, I would suspect, sort of came into this a little bit haphazardly. We took a job that we knew we could do, and we ended up getting a lot of these systems and taking on responsibilities for how they all integrate. So, a couple of things just to keep in mind. Really, the number one thing to keep in mind is just make sure, as you're working with these different audiences, is that you're asking business questions. So I oftentimes have people come and say, I want you to take this data, I want you to push it into this other system. And all of a sudden, if you really get into it, you're like, oh, you don't really know what you're asking, right? Because they're not used to being in these systems all the time. So the biggest value that I think I've, sort of holistically brought, and I've done all the, nitty gritty, but I think when you're interpreting data and you're taking data, the way a salesperson is going to ask you for something and the way an analyst is going to read it, not always aligned. So do yourself a favor, ask business questions. When we build predictive models, if somebody says, build me a predictive model for APAC, I'm not going to use North America data. Right? It's not going to get you to the right outcome. So understand not just the source of the data, the way that the data was acquired, but also how it's going to be used and by whom, and make sure you've got those pieces aligned.
Yeah, so data integration. It sounds easy, right? Because usually what happens is you've got somebody that comes to you and says, hey, I've got this data, I've got this stuff. And I need to get it in your system. I need to get it in the system, right? So we can report on it or work on it or analyze it. Or I need you to get this data from your system to another system. And they walk in and they're like, oh, it's really easy. I'm just going to give you what you need. But it's never, ever, ever that easy if you've been doing it before, right? You see, you've got your ideal and you've got your reality, because typically that's what happens. You know, someone walks in and they hand you the data and they want this square block to go into this round hole, and it doesn't work that way, okay? So what do? It's time to problem solve, right? Okay, and I love this little GIF that's going here, because she's trying to get it in, and this is what you do, right? You try to get in, you work at it, and one solution is to just just shove it in, just figure out a way to get it in, and that is a solution. But typically, what are we going to do? We're going to walk away with bad data if we do that. So it's our jobs as data integrators to do a few key things, right? To bring the people into the conversation, to identify the players, to understand the process, and develop a solution that works for everybody. So we get the right output. Because you shove that in, great. What are you going to have to do to get it back out again, right? You're going to have to, again, take the lid off and dump it out. You can't get it out in a good manner.
I love the
right?
nods of validation. They're like, oh, I did that too.
Yeah. Everybody's been through this, right? And chances are we've done it. I've done it. I'll be honest. You know, there are sometimes people give me data, and that's the best way to get it in, right? It's not the optimal solution. Sometimes you're in a hurry and you've got to do that. But if we're going to do it the right way to get the right outcomes, we're gonna work at it a different way. So we were talking about identifying the players, okay? So it could be something as simple as somebody brings you a spreadsheet, right? It could get super complex, like Erin's examples. Those are way more complex than I'm used to dealing with. We're currently working on integrating with another system. And what I'm learning is the first thing I need to do is I need to know who are the players involved, right? Yes, I need to get my accounting data from my system into that system, right? But that system has its own system owners, right? There are other people that own the data in that system, you know, and I own the data in this system, or my account leads own the data in this system. And we need to make sure that the data that they own, that we're now going to integrate, meets the needs of both team members.
I have a customer, they literally have 75 different technologies in their MarTech stack alone. So the integrations are like these meetings, and they have a whole portal just to deal with, like, I want a new system, I want a new tool.
Right.
And they have to do this in a really thoughtful way, because you can't just keep connecting stuff.
No, because who owns the data ultimately, right? You've got to figure out which one is the system of record. You've got to understand that process.
Yeah.
How are we getting the information, and where is it ultimately going, right? And in that process, who owns it? And what are we trying to do with it?
Yeah.
Okay, because if we don't understand those things, the data is not going to mean anything to anybody, because you're going to end up with duplicate records, you're going to end up with bad data. You've really got to understand and have everybody come together and really get an understanding of what the concept is and what's the end goal, right? So that you can develop the correct solution. And the correct solution might just be you take XAuthor, and you pop the data into your spreadsheet in XAuthor, into your app, and you load it into the system. It might be as simple and as easy as that, but you still need to go through the process to understand the needs of people, because just putting data in doesn't mean it's going to do anything for anybody. I can put data in all day long, and it might not be useful data. And I might be putting a bunch of data in and creating a bunch of records that really nobody needs, but nobody asked the question. Somebody just had a spreadsheet and they assumed we needed it, right? I've been there before.
Yeah, this has implications too on the size of your databases and the costs of your systems, right? Your marketing automation or your CRM, they're going to have limitations and costs associated with the size of those databases. So the last thing you want to do is just pile stuff in and use it as a repository if you don't really have a plan.
Yeah, and as system admins, as the people that are doing these data integrations, it's not our job to own the data. But it is our job to make sure the people that do own the data are managing the data and understand the data. It's our job to facilitate that.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if we don't help people do that, then nobody owns the data.
Exactly.
And when something's wrong, who are they going to come to? They're going to come to me. They're going to come to you.
Yeah.
Because they know we know the most about the data.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what are your biggest challenges with data integration?
So here's where we're going to riff. So we had a third co-presenter. She got stuck. Her flight didn't get here. So you're part of our presentation now.
So we're gonna involve you guys. I know it's the end of the day, and everybody's tired, and we want to get to happy hour. But you guys have been through your own data integration challenges and solutions, and so we think this might be a good time to kind of talk to each other, talk to us, and we're gonna talk through, you know, what some of your biggest challenges are. Does anybody have an example of a really great data integration challenge that they want to talk about?
And while you raise hands and Nikki finds you, I'll preface this with, we got up here because we have done this and we like to talk about it because we're really passionate about it. But we also know that the greatest asset that we have is actually the people we know and the data that the information they can share with each other. So I run a user group, you've got a podcast, like we connect with people so they can connect each other. So I suspect there are some awesome lessons learned and some awesome tips and tricks in this room. And I would love if we can share a couple. So are there like hurdles that you faced and you found a really cool solution? Are there tools that you love that other people should know about that you want to like advocate for while we're here? Any challenges that maybe somebody else in the room can help you solve that you're facing now?
We got one.
Yeah, go John.
So I got a chance to talk to Nana earlier today, just a couple moments, nothing too crazy. And she explained to me that data integration, I didn't think I had any in my system that I was doing. I'm like, everything's all in the same platform and I just don't have to worry about it. But then she asked the one key question, do you ever have to just load data in for any user? I'm like, well, of course I do. Somebody always comes with just a list of something. I don't know where it came from. It could be off the street for all I know.
Yeah.
But once she explained that is a data integration and all of this can still be applied, it made so much more sense. And then I realized, I do this all the time. And they keep mentioning X-Author. I've built little apps for people because I got tired of loading data for them so they can do it themselves. And I kind of hid in their little keys to make sure that they're doing things right and not loading trash into my database. I got a little bit possessive about it. But you solo admins out there are very possessive over your orgs, right? I don't know, that's just my little input because I learned something today.
Yay.
Yay!
I'll share one too. So I had a major duplicate issue at my last company. I worked for a company called Nginx, one of the most prolific web servers in the world, 150 million plus domains running on it. We got hit by spam bots all the time. We had people that were open source dogmatists that would put in like a Gmail until suddenly they were finally ready to buy and then they'd tell you who they were. And then sales would go, I sourced the lead. And like, you didn't source the lead. And we'd go back and dedupe it.
Yeah.
And we were 100% marketing driven pipeline. So literally I knew they didn't source the lead. The business is growing, it's going great. So then we've got, outbound as well now. But one of the real issues we had was primacy on fields, right? So when you merge two records, how are you going to deal with field primacy and making sure that the first one acquired, you get that acquisition program, but maybe the most recently updated address field or phone number or email is the one you want. So I think there's even things like that. And we see this, we have, as I mentioned, we have a massive database at Mintigo. We have customers that will input lists from trade shows, and then they'll put in a list from a syndicator, and then they'll put in a list that some sales rep had from wherever, and we end up with things like completely inconsistent industries, right? So they're trying to say, I'm going to segment on industry, but if you've got a gazillion sources going in that aren't using the same data, just standardizing that is a massive project, right? So I think there's some really cool lessons learned around that too for me, that when we went in, we ended up making all of our marketing programs hugely more successful. The segmentation was more powerful, all these other things, because we actually went through and did a proper deduping and did it field by field, right? Where some of the platforms, a lot of the CRMs will just say which one is the master and you sort of squish the other one. But that was a great lesson, and I'm happy to share tools and process that we used if anybody wants to talk about it later.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think one of the biggest takeaways that I would say from this particular conversation is to know that there's no one right way to go about data integration, because it could be something as simple as loading a spreadsheet. It could be using XAuthor to create apps for your users so that when they are inputting data into the system, that you're capturing the right things and that you're doing it in a way that makes it efficient and easy for them to do that. It could be using a tool that is loading millions of records and making sure that those are all the right records at the right time. It could be engaging with your developers and creating APIs and pushing data back and forth between multiple systems. Whatever the data integration is that you have, there are tools and there are people. Most importantly, there are people out there that know how to do it.
Yeah.
I certainly don't know how to do it all. This integration that we're going through is challenging me. I've never done an integration like this, and you know what I'm doing? I'm reaching out to my people in the community. There's people in the Salesforce community, there's people in the Dynamics community, there's people all around that have done it and have been there, and don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call them, you know, because they've been where you're at, and guaranteed if they've been where you're at, they're willing to tell you where to watch out for those pitfalls.
Yeah, I think we've both really benefited from other people taking care of us and saying, hey, you're going through this, I've got your back. I am aggressive, like to the point where it kind of freaks people out about offering to help, right? Like I'll meet somebody, I'm like, oh, I did that once, let me help if I can. And they're like, are you trying to sell me something? And it's unrelated to my product, right? Completely has nothing to do with my company. But I'm so happy to share because so many people have done such like offered me such grace in this process. And said, oh, you're going through something, I've done that too, let me help. So I would also encourage you to reach out to others if you do know stuff and just share the information, right? If you meet somebody at a conference and you have a chance, I literally, my job now, I was recruited by somebody I met 12 years ago. You know, literally had met 12 years ago, worked at the same company, never worked together, worked at Citrix, big company, was running down the hall at Marketo Summit last year to get the Revy Award, whatever thing, and I like hit some guy accidentally with my shoulder, right? Because it's Vegas, and you're bouncing off each other, and I turned and I said, I'm so sorry, sir, and it was this guy. And he ended up ultimately recruiting me over to my current company. So weird stuff happens if you just sort of reach out and offer people some information to help. And it's, you know, I was just telling Nana earlier, she was telling me about this integration. I said, this customer with the 75 things in their MarTech stack, they've got great content from last week's conference, let me get it for you. Right? So like it's a really cool thing to get to be part of the community that sort of shares the stuff with each other. We're totally available to you. We got emails and cards and whatever.
And we might not be able to answer your question,
but we probably know somebody that does.
We know somebody that does.
Yeah. Good.
So,
okay.
Anything else? Anybody have any questions? Anything?
Happy hour. Thanks for spending your last session with us.
Thank you so much.
You guys are awesome.
We appreciate it.